So now we kind of get ready for the conference portion of the schedule. And we head to September 27th, a Saturday in Raleigh, North Carolina against NC State, Carter Finley Stadium. And look, it's a road game fresh off of 2 home games, and presumably, at least for both of us, I'm assuming a 2 or 3 game win streak. This is important because, you don't want to get too far behind in the conference, Jack, and NC State's good, but they're not great or anything like that.
No. And I think my gut says this is a loss, though. Like, my gut says your first conference game on the road in Raleigh, that's a raucous atmosphere. You know how intense NC State fans are. I believe you got on their bad side early on last college football season at one point.
I did.
So you know the wrath of the Wolfpack. I think coming off of your home game against Vandy, home game against ODU, a home game against Wofford, your only real road game was a neutral site game in Atlanta, Georgia. Your first true road game of the season, that'll be tough. That'll be tough to go down there. You don't want to put yourself behind the 8 ball, but the ACC, I don't think, has a world beater in it this year that's going to go undefeated in conference play. People will try to tell you it's Miami. It won't be Miami. They'll lose 3 very important games at some point in the season, but that's besides the point. So I think they fall in this game, and I think it's kind of a wake-up call after a hot start to the season.
Yeah, and I'm looking here to see what NC State's first 4 games are. East Carolina, Virginia. They're playing Virginia in a non-conference game, which is always interesting. At Wake Forest, at Duke. So they have 3 presumable conference opponents before they even get to Virginia Tech. Their non-conference games are kind of towards the middle of the season. So a little bit of desperation time potentially, especially if those first 2 road games at Wake and at Duke don't go their way. So you're going to get an NC State team that could be desperate to maybe stop a 2-game losing streak.
Or an NC State team that's also 2 up in the conference already and feeling good about themselves at home. Their first conference home game. So, like, whether it's either end of the spectrum, even if it's in the middle of the spectrum, if you're that early in the season and picking up your second conference loss or your third conference loss, you feel like you're putting yourself really behind the 8 ball then. So that's a tough draw early on for Virginia Tech against an NC State squad that will have already played 2 conference games, like you said, against 3 conference opponents. That's a tough way to open it up. Plus, it's your first true road game of the season.
Right, exactly. Considering how they are starting the season, and it's going to be essentially a road game. I feel like there will probably be more South Carolina fans, but it's of course a neutral site. Saturday, October 4th, Wake Forest comes to Blacksburg, and Wake Forest is a team that in the past you'd sit there and say, well, they've got a really good offense, and I mean, that could certainly change. They're bringing in a ton of transfers with the new head coach coming from Washington State. They had a couple of days during this offseason where they brought in a whole bunch of guys. And so I think Wake Forest is in a little bit of transition. And so this is an opportunity to get, a win at home against a team that may be still trying to figure itself out.
Wake Forest picked up a huge wide receiver from the Division II ranks. He was a baller at Virginia Union here in Richmond, Virginia. They got him to transfer there. He was being courted by a ton of Power 4 teams. I mean, heck, a ton of teams across the entire nation. But new coach, new roster. Wake Forest should be in a down year this year. This is an opportunity for Virginia Tech to bounce back, get a win. I think this week and the next week, October 11th, could set them up well for a couple quick bang wins against lesser opponents.
And this is Wake Forest's first road game. They will have played 3 straight at home, then had a bye week, and then played another home game. So this will be their first road game of the season, which will be interesting with that team that's kind of figuring themselves out. They do start a little soft. Kennesaw State and Western Carolina at home. Then 5 days later, they play NC State before the bye. And then after the bye, they get Georgia Tech. Before playing at Virginia Tech. So that's another thing that kind of goes in their favor. And look, this is where, Jack, the fast start is going to help, because if Tech struggles out of the gate by this time next season, Maybe Lane is not as crowded. Maybe Lane's not a sellout. So they really have to start fast and get that 3-1 start. You said maybe lose at NC State, but then win this game. But you got to keep your fans interested to make that home field advantage matter.
You really do, because it feels like it's almost at a tipping point where people really are starting to get a little fed up with kind of the lack of consistent success, especially after this last season.
Yeah. And look, I think it's like this, and I'm not singling out Hokie fans. I think Hokie fans are fantastic, but I'm also saying that, like any fan base in college football, a slow start after a disappointing year is a recipe to people starting to sell their tickets and starting to kind of look elsewhere for things to do on their fall Saturdays. So I'm just, it's just something to kind of watch out for.
Yeah, come on
Next
here.
game, Saturday, October 11th. A road game at Georgia Tech down in Bobby Dodd Stadium, a Georgia Tech team that was very impressive last year, a Georgia Tech team that, much like everybody else, is in transition. They've got some new players that they're going to try and work out here, but Bobby Dodd has traditionally been a tough place to play. This is a game that you'd like to see them win, but could be very tough.
Especially the fact that Georgia Tech's coming off of a bye week. So they have that extra rest. It's the rest disadvantage for Virginia Tech. You are starting the season off with these 6 games in a row. This is the 6th. After this, you do get that bye week. So how do you approach it? How do the guys get into it? Because you see that off week coming up. This is a Georgia Tech team that typically, yeah, it's tough to play them at Bobby Dodd, but overall, it's not necessarily a world beater team. This could be at a point in the season where you're looking to move to 2-1 in ACC play, potentially looking at 3-1, 4-2, 5-2. And if you're sitting at 5-2 going into your off week, middle of October, things are feeling a lot better than they would be if you fall to Georgia Tech. All of a sudden you pick up potentially 2 conference losses. Heck, probably not 3, because I don't think you're losing to Wake Forest at home. But this is a sneaky, very big game. And Georgia Tech being on that bye week, coming off of that bye week, will give Virginia Tech a lot of issues that I don't think they otherwise would have to run into.
Yeah, and this will be a Georgia Tech team that has already played at Colorado. They will have hosted Clemson, so they will have had a couple of tough games: Gardner Webb, Temple, and at Wake Forest. So the other games early on in Georgia Tech's schedule. So it's really one of those road trips. I haven't had a lot of faith in a lot of road trips that Tech has made the last couple of seasons. I probably won't have a lot of faith in this one, but it's an opportunity to show people, with the new offense, the new defense, and everything, this is not the same team, and they can win on the road, especially in a tough place like Bobby Dodd.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see.
And then we get an interesting game, to say the least. And I'm only saying that because we don't know what date it is. It's either a Thursday night game or a Friday night game against Cal, which that ESPN knows how good Blacksburg is on a Thursday night, and you knew they're going to try and get one in there. But to have Cal come over and be that opponent and flying across the West Coast, let's just say this: if Virginia Tech doesn't win this game, then it would be a massively disappointing season, and it would be a massively disappointing night, whether it's a Thursday or Friday night.
If you don't win this game, your season's over. Good luck. Have fun in 2026. Pack it up. Don't need to finish out the year. We're out.
And by the way, I do think it's funny. Cal has 2 of those games where we don't know the day, because the game before that, when they host North Carolina, that could be on a Thursday or a Friday night. So the ACC sat there. They're like, we know who we want to play, but we don't know where we want them to play and what day we want them to play. So, look, Cal was decent last year. I mean, certainly you could have said they could have won that Miami game last year if the officials didn't help Miami out in that sort of situation. But, it's a Cal team that's kind of getting used to being in the conference. Remember, they're still not taking any TV revenue. That's another one of the things that was part of the whole deal and everything. They're taking less of the TV revenue, but it's look, if you're Virginia Tech, you cannot lose to Cal. You certainly cannot lose the Cal on a Thursday night or a Friday night. That's for darn sure.
And it's a Cal with a new quarterback. Their quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, left the program to go to Indiana. So you got a whole new quarterback in there. Mendoza was good for you last season. And you're going to restart from scratch there. Cal should not be a world beater this year. They weren't a world beater last year. They'll probably finish in the bottom half of the ACC. Let's see. You got to win this game. Like, regardless of what coming into this game, you're riding 3 games in the ACC. If you go 1-2 in that, your season's not over. But if you lose to Cal, your season's over.
Yeah, considering down the stretch, the opponents you have, where they are, the layout, the layout of the schedule. Yes, this is a very important game. This is, and you'll get the extra day to prepare for Louisville, and we'll do that in our next podcast, the last 4 games of the schedule. But yeah, this is kind of the must win if they lose this game. And I have them at 4-4 at this point. So I have them, we went over the first part. I had them going 2-2. I have them losing the 2 road games, winning the 2 home games, sitting at 4-4, and probably at 2-2, you're probably 2 games out of first place in the conference because I'm guessing somebody might be undefeated. You'll be, if at worst, you'll be 1 game out of this division, so out of this conference. But I can't do anything more than 2-2 here and be boring and just take them to win the home games and lose the road games.
See, I'm a little bit more optimistic. I've got them at 6-2 now. It's just another 3-1 stretch for me because I think they lose to NC State, but I do think they pull out the Wake win, Georgia Tech win, and Cal win. So I've got them at 6-2 up to this point in the season. But this last portion is where things may get a little rough and bumpy.
Yeah, 6-2. I'm gonna guess, and it hasn't come out yet, I don't think. And we certainly, for those who are not familiar, in Virginia, we can't see this anyway. But I'm pretty sure that Virginia Tech's win total number when it comes out, which will probably be in like July or August, I'm guessing it could be 6.5. It could be 5.5 even. So you're looking at an over right now, and I'm just looking to make sure. Yeah, it's not out yet. I'm guessing if it might be 5.5 or 6.5, and you almost are over, and we still have 4 games left to go.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil what I'm thinking for these last 4, but they may be topped out at 6-2.
I certainly can see what you're talking about, and I think I am sitting at at 4-4. I think I would still need to get some work to the over because I'm just going to think, the way the schedule lays out and the way Vegas perceives this program. I just think that 5.5 or 6.5 is going to be the number. They're going to look at the home games. They're going to say, yeah, they've got very manageable home games: ODU, Wofford, Wake, Cal. Those first 4, and then the other 2 that's coming up. Like I could see the number being 5.5 or 6, and that'll be very interesting. And certainly, we're not going to lock down our decisions now in February, but that number will be a fascinating one when it comes out.
I will say, like at 6-2, there are 3 games on this schedule that I think are still a toss-up that I have going to them in the win column. Vandy, you lost to them last year. That very well could be a loss. And with Diego Pavia coming back, Vanderbilt should be able to build on their success from last year. The NC State game I have as a loss. Georgia Tech could easily be a loss as well. It's a tough place to play. Georgia Tech showed flashes last year. They are kind of on the same level as Virginia Tech. I just give the Hokies the win, maybe because of brand loyalty more than anything else. So there's a couple of games in there that I could flip, and I could be right there with you, Matt. But I'm going to have some optimism here after hearing your conversation with Philip Montgomery, hearing your conversation with Sam Seifkis. Maybe I'm buying a little bit too much Hokie stock like I was at this time last season because I thought they were going to win the ACC at this time last season, but boy, was I wrong.
Yeah, my optimism went out the window from last year. I went from 1 to 10 on my optimism, and then now I'm kind of going to go back to my reserve 3 or 4 when it comes to it. And look, it depends on the headlines that come out of spring ball. It depends on injuries, the second round of transfer portal stuff, like what happens there. If there is some positivity out of all of that, then mine will raise. But right now, I'm very cautious. I'm holding my hand of poker close, but I'm not ready to reveal it yet.
I like it. Cautiously cautious. Not cautiously optimistic, cautiously cautious.